Here's a preview of this episode. And now, this episode.
Hey, buddy.
Really excited about this podcast episode. Everybody's going to see in a second. We recorded last October. It's incredible. You're a Comedy Works headliner, been on Comedy Central, got your book, Free Roll. A lot of great information for new comedians in that conversation. It's quarantine time, coronavirus time right now. It's, what is today even? Wednesday, April 8th. Who knows? 2020. I know, right?
No idea.
So we're gonna screen this episode for everybody, and then we're gonna come back, and I'm gonna ask you 5 questions. Peek at my notes here. The last show you did in front of a live audience, I'm curious what that was, because nobody's doing live comedy now. What's new in the podcasting world? I think that's your beautiful studio right there. You could be anywhere in the world, maybe, for this quarantine situation. How's Denver treating you? When do you think we'll be back? A little bit of a gambling angle. We'll pick a date and try and do over-under. And then once you get released from this crazy lockdown, where are you going to go eat or drink? So we'll cover those 5 questions in a second. Everybody's going to get to see the conversation with Brandt when I drove him down to Comedy Works where he was performing. And we'll be back after that conversation. See ya.
All right, there we go. We're live. All right.
Nice.
Brandt Tobler.
Hello,
Here.
friends.
Mark Masters.
We
Figuring
did
this
it.
out. We're driving to South Club.
Yes.
South Comedy Works Club. What are you doing tonight?
Feature.
Teacher.
Do a hot little 20 minutes and get out of there.
Right. Killer. Let's talk. Like, how did you get started in comedy? How long you been doing comedy?
Well, I've probably been doing it like 15 years, I'd say.
Okay.
I don't know. I actually have a videotape of the first time I went on, but I got to find an adapter to get it to work.
Is it VHS?
Yeah, it's like a little mini camera.
Oh yeah.
So
remember those.
I bought one, but I want to get
like
the
from
tape.
Back to the Future.
Yeah. I want to get the tape of it, and so I could get the exact date. But I started in Vegas. I wanted to start in Phoenix, because that's the first time I thought about doing it. But I grew up in Wyoming, so it wasn't even really a dream, because there was no comedy clubs or anything. And then I was like class clown junior high, class clown high school. Then one day my buddy's like, "You should be a comedian." So I went to Barnes and Noble, and I bought a book. And then the book said buy like a tape recorder and a notepad. And I started kind of write down ideas. And I was in Phoenix at the time, but I didn't know where to go or what to do or how open mics worked, and I was scared, so then I didn't do it.
Okay.
And I eventually moved to Vegas, and then I wanted to do it. I knew I still wanted to do it, so I did a little research, and there was one open mic in Vegas, so I went and I signed up, and I chickened out, and I called him, said like my dad died or something. And then another time I signed up and I chickened out. Then the third time I had been telling my friends that I was going to do it.
When you were chickening out, were you going and watching the other comics?
No. I mean, I would go watch, not the night obviously when I didn't perform, because I would say I couldn't make it.
Okay.
Which is funny in hindsight, like they care at all.
Right.
They don't care, but I was so worried about telling them. So then eventually my friend's like, "Are you gonna do this or what?" And then I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it on this Sunday." So I invited like 12 friends and had a couple drinks, and then I just did it, which was actually good because I was so prepared.
Nice.
Because I'd practiced it so many times. I didn't know that you weren't allowed to do the same jokes over and over. So the first 5 times, I mean, I kind of knew, but I made a commitment the first 5 times to do 5 different sets.
Right.
Which
yeah.
actually just happened over time by just me being scared. So then luckily the first time it went good. You know, actually the first couple times it went good, I think just because I had practiced so much.
Yeah. Are you glad you started with a book? Did you think that was helpful?
Yeah. I
Or
mean,
in retrospect,
no.
do you think it doesn't matter?
Well, it doesn't matter. Now you don't. Now you can just listen to podcasts or videos or... Like
Did you know I wrote a book?
Yeah.
Speak of the devil?
I know.
Check that out.
Good plug.
If you are thinking, if you're chickening out at open mics, you can read all about it there.
Yeah, it's I mean, a lot of people say like classes are bad or something, but I would kind of wish back then there was a class, because I wish I would have just known how to do like the simple stuff of stand up. I mean, the class is gonna make you funnier, or like if you want to get funny, you just got to go do it. But I wish I would have known just how to sign up. But now we have so much more technology and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I did it, and then we were rolling.
Nice.
No looking back.
Nice. If you could go back and talk to yourself that Sunday, the first time you did it, what would you that would change the trajectory? You've obviously been pretty successful.
Well, I would go. If I could change anything, I would have just started when I wanted to, like when I first, because it's just repetition, and you just the more times you do it, the better you get. So. People always ask me, hey, I want to do stand-up. I say, go do it tomorrow.
Right.
But just go do it tomorrow. Because the sooner you start, and I can't talk comedy with you till you do it. People are always like, well, what about this? I go, you have to go do it. And then you can tell me what happened to you. And then I can tell you what I would do or what suggestions I have or ideas. But, you know, it's frustrating. But it's honestly, it was me in the beginning. But so many times you're like, well, I want to do it. It's like, well, you got to just go do it.
Yeah, you got to rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, you just got to go for it. So that would be the only advice to me. But, I mean, you...
Just go sooner.
Yeah.
So you would go back in time even farther.
Yeah, I would go
say,
back to...
Come on, man.
I mean, I would have...
Get going.
I spent my whole life playing basketball. I would have taken theater and stuff in high school if I could really change it. Well, maybe not, because all that is part of...
It's part of your
the journey, yeah, but...
Stories.
As far as that first time, no.
Stickers. This.
What is it?
It's the CU Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
There's two of them, and one's mounted behind the other one.
That's funny. But yeah, I would, yeah, I know that first time it went good. Luckily, you know what? People say their first time. Did your first time go good?
No. I yelled at the host.
Uh-oh.
I didn't realize, like, it was at the Irish Rovers, R&B, and I think the sets were like 3 minutes long. But then later in the night, they changed to 2 minutes. So I had planned everything around 3 minutes, and I didn't hear the announcement that it changed. And so he lit me early, and I'm like building to what I think is like a real funny closer, which in retrospect probably wasn't. But he gets me like off stage before I finish, and I'm all disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, it took me so long to psych up to do it. And so yeah, I started yelling at him, which you should never yell at the mic host. But now we're friends, and all is forgiven.
See, that's stuff you don't learn in a book, or I mean, maybe they tell you that, but you don't know until you're in the moment. But if you worked on something, it's good. If you worked on something, you want to get to the finish line. Then.
Yeah, it went okay. Like in the beginning, the other thing is you go up so late when nobody knows who you are. There's like 6 people in the audience, and I got like one decent laugh. But honestly, like it just, I didn't know what I was doing, and my jokes were so long. Like not just like a couple words long. It was like I was talking for like 30 seconds for one punchline, which is terrible.
Well, see, I was lucky. I was the opposite. I started I like Mitch Hedberg was my favorite comedian.
Oh, nice.
So my jokes were like short in the beginning. So, and then eventually they became longer. It's more to me. It's more fun to tell long stories. That's what I prefer now. But
yeah, the other big mistake I made was I spoke what I knew, and I'm like twice the age of the average person in the audience.
Yeah.
And people just didn't understand my references, and after going to open mics for a while, I realized, you know, okay, these are the topics that people understand. And
it happens to me now when I go to college gigs.
Yeah,
I'm 42, and like stuff if I get a college gig, I felt it the last time I did one. I was like, oh, they don't know what I talk about like a collect call in one of my bits that usually gets a laugh, and it got nothing, and I was like, oh, they don't know what a collect call is. They don't know.
That's funny.
So just learning that kind of stuff. But I was scared. You know what? Why I really chickened out is that I would a couple times in life I talked into a microphone, and whenever I heard my voice amplified, it would make my eyes water. So I was like, I can't be a comedian that cries when he's on stage. Yeah. That was like my biggest fear. Is like, and I don't know what it was. Obviously, I got over it, and it didn't happen that first time. But for some reason, whenever I would talk into a microphone, it would make my eyes water, which was weird. So that's what really scared me. Is like, this is gonna be depressing if I'm up there trying to be funny, but I'm crying.
So what kind of recording technology did you have? Did you have like a shoebox sized tape recorder?
I just had
they didn't have smartphones.
No. I just had a little, like a tape recorder
like the kind a doctor would have.
But I never used it.
A dictaphone.
I wish I should have I should still to this day be more disciplined about that, but
They have like the tiny little cassette tapes, those cute little.
Yeah, I had one, and then I eventually had
Like a digital
little one that would just play back, but I would talk into it a lot. I tried that, like walking around. Like I never practiced talking right into a mirror. Like I would just walk. Luckily at the time my neighborhood was just being built, so there's a lot of open area. I just walk around and say it out loud, which is fine when you don't look like. If I did it here, I look like a crazy person down the streets of Denver, but
Right.
out there it was good for me to just.
That was Vegas?
Yeah, I would just walk around and just say it out loud to myself, and then you know, most of the time I have a pretty good memory, so luckily I can usually memorize it all, but a lot of it is writing on stage, like when you're scared. That's another reason you shouldn't worry too much about it in the beginning, because a lot of my jokes come from just being scared on stage, just survival.
Right.
Like, oh, I guess that's why you should record always.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've screwed up the wording that I had planned.
Yeah.
And then it works better than the last like 3 or 4 times. So
Yeah.
It just comes out more naturally, or for whatever reason it's funnier.
Yeah, in the moment. There's a lot of times that I'm just like, oh, I gotta remember that.
Do you, when you go on stage now at clubs and stuff, do you record yourself?
No, I should. I'm the laziest. Well, I mean, most comics are lazy. That's a problem, but I need to take it more as a job. That's what I respect about the New York guys that have came through lately. It's a job, and that's why I think they're more successful than everybody else. It's because they really write and they record every set, and I don't like listening to myself as part of the problem, you know. Part of that's I need to write more because I get tired of my own jokes.
Right.
You know, it's just laziness. If something kills for a long time, but I haven't, you know, ideally I should be working harder to try to get like a 5-minute set and then get that on like Conan or something, and then I just wouldn't do the, you know, the rule kind of is once you do it on TV, you're supposed to not do it anymore.
Right.
So that's what I need to just get this stuff on TV, but it's hard.
Yeah.
But I should always be writing more and recording, but like I said, I just don't like listening to myself on the playback. Like I've never listened to like one of my own podcasts, or if I'm a guest on someone else's,
Right.
I never listen to it. It feels weird to listen to myself, but I probably should.
What's your podcast? Why don't you pitch it real quick?
It's called the 31 podcast, which is kind of transitioning to a quick question for you. But I built a studio in my basement, so it's going to be a lot of podcasts, and I'm trying to build more of a network. So, but right now you can find it at the 31 on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and all that. And I think I'm going to change it to the Content Factory. Is what I'm calling my studio. But I'm exhausted from recording. I've been recording all day the last 2 days, just calling around with people all over the world, just doing guests. So. But I'm gonna do a podcast with my girlfriend, and then I'm gonna do this Craigslist podcast, which I'm gonna start working on next week. But I think podcasts are the future, or the present of it. I mean, like if you
watch the attendance, right?
Yeah, whoever your favorite comic is has a podcast. You're not selling any tickets without a podcast, I don't think. I mean, unless you're Chris Rock or Seinfeld, but Chappelle, you have to be an A-list celebrity
or TV credit.
Yeah, if you're an A-list celebrity, you don't have to have a podcast, but these podcasts are making people into A-list celebrities, so that's the one thing and then a lot of comedians like, well, everyone has a podcast. Like, well, there's a reason that everyone listens to podcasts, so it's a content world. Things have changed. Like, I left LA 2 years ago, and I think I've done more for my career.
Over?
Yeah, that's it right
Scene
there.
of the crime.
Yeah. I think leaving LA was the best thing for my career.
Yeah, so let's go through where you've been. So you started in Vegas, you're a crappy open mic comedian.
Yeah,
are you like hitting them like every night, or what's?
No, there was only one back then. It was a Sunday night, so it was a big deal. It was a place called Boomers. It was a bar called Boomers, which they called the comedy night Boomers Humors, of course, and it was on Sirius Street. So every week we got a new open micer making that joke. So it was every Sunday night, and it was it's off the strip. It was in like the warehouse part of town. So you would go down Sirius Street, very dark, nothing going on, and there's this bar just in the middle of nowhere. But that drive, you'd feel it in your stomach when you take it right onto Sirius, and then you'd be like, what are we gonna see? Because the parking lot, you know, sometimes there'd be 8 cars, but sometimes there'd be 40 cars, and then that moment of seeing the parking lot,
Yeah.
was always like, because you just never knew. It was before really social media. I mean, there might have been a little MySpace, but we weren't into promoting or anything. So that was always the fun part of like, oh, sometimes there would just be a ton of cars, and you knew there'd be a new guy or something, and then they knew how to run the open mic. So the new guy that brought all the people would always go up last, so the people would stay. So it was we'd have an audience. So.
Right.
But it was magical. I mean, it was important. It was the most important thing every week, and then even if there's no crowd, we would hang out and just get drunk, and just that camaraderie was the funnest part of, you know, just busting balls and trying to impress girls, and just it was just always it was my
Did anybody
favorite.
else out of that scene make it like you?
Yeah, like Shuli, who's on the Howard Stern show. So Shuli at the time, he was running it, and I thought he was the funniest. And another guy named Jamie Mad Dog Mattern, who's doing really good in New York City. He's like everybody's favorite host and like the main crowd warm-up guy out on the East Coast.
Nice.
But those guys ran it together. And then there was another guy named Potter who was like, he's in Kansas somewhere. I don't think he does it much anymore, but he was so fun. These guys were fearless. They would do crazy stuff. Like Potter would wear like masks, and they really were creative, which was very inspiring. And then Shuli was just a fan of Howard Stern, and he would call in every morning at like 3 o'clock Vegas time. And then eventually he got a job on Howard, and then now he's like a main part of this Howard Stern show. So it was very inspiring for us to be like, oh wow, you know. And Shuli was always really good to us. You know, he always would come back, and he was the first guy to let us know, like, oh wow, because the clubs wouldn't mess with us at all. There was no open mic in the clubs, and they didn't care about local comedy at all, because they could get, because back then the comedy paid better.
It's the same now, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard
well,
that
no, they're
Vegas.
better now, but back then it was really, everyone wanted to go to Vegas, so the LA guys, if you were a headliner in LA, you would feature, everyone would come take a step. I mean, it's still kind of that way. Everybody will go down a spot on where they really are just because they want to perform in Vegas, you know. So the clubs had no open mic night, none of that. So we didn't. Eventually, LA Comedy Club came, and they were the first one to really give guys a chance. And then, you know, and part of it, clubs always give guys chances when they're not making money. So they're like, oh, this is like, and credit to LA Comedy Club that they were the first ones to really help us. So so then we got in there, and then over time, you know, the rest of the clubs eventually would use the local comics. But I mean, it sucks now because I love the scene. That's where it started. It'll always be like my comedy home. But the local scene in Vegas is awful. They just don't work hard. They're just, none of them are any good. Like, I challenged them a couple months ago, like, somebody get good, somebody step up and show me like that you're good, so when I come there I'll give you guest spots. And there's a lot of fighting, but I think that's any scene, which I'm okay with. Like, when I came here, the scene was way too soft, and it was too many people complaining all the time. There's a bunch of girls that were awful for the scene, that just complained about everybody being sexist, and it wasn't fair towards women. But the problem is, women run this scene. Wendy Curtis owns both clubs, and Amy runs the Improv.
Yeah.
So it's hard to play that woman card when really they just sucked. They just weren't good. And that was at the start of the Me Too movement. We couldn't really say it, but if we're being honest, they were just shitty. Now, there's very funny women on the scene now, but those women at the time were really bringing down the scene, and I think that's why Wendy Curtis started Thick Skin, which is everybody's favorite show, where we can get back to busting balls and stuff, because I don't want to sound like an old, like, get off my lawn guy, but I think it's better. Like, when I started, part of the reason it took me so long is because those guys, if you were shitty, they told you. Like, and I think that's good. Like, I'm kind of pro bully, at least in comedy, because you're either if you come out and you're bad, and people bully you, then you either get better or you leave.
Yeah.
The main problem I have with stand-up is people are so entitled because these open mics, if you write your name down, you think you deserve to go, that you get to go up. It's the only thing in the world where if you go to a karaoke or a bar or something and you're awful, after like 2 or 3 times they say, hey, you don't get to go up anymore.
Right.
But for some reason, stand-up people think because they wrote their name on a list, but those are the people that always get shows canceled and stuff. Like the first thing I tell people, if you want to do stand-up, it's not fair, and it should never be fair because it's just not. And if you want it to be fair, go do something else. Because if you bring 20 people, if I'm way funnier than you, but you bring 20 people, you're way more. It's still a business. People, too many of these young comics are like, well, it should be fair, and I got there first, I signed up first. No one cares about fair. It's still the open mic. You gotta make the bar happy. So the first 10 people that show up, they don't drink or anything. They just do their time and leave. Make them, who cares? So learning stuff like that is just like, and that's what Vegas. All of us Vegas comics take a lot of pride. We could do any show. We're not scared of anything. Because first of all, we would do shows at bars, and everyone else performs at bars, but they don't have slot machines. So you have to try to get someone with a gambling addiction to turn around and watch you. You know how hard that is? I mean, and then we have to worry about if we upset them, bartender would cancel the show right there. If some old lady drops $2,000 in video poker every 3 nights, I could bring 150 people in there and have them all have $10 beer tabs. That still doesn't get close to what she's doing. So if you offend her, so we just had rooms like that. So then we'd get pushed off the strip towards these, dive bars, and then there's plenty of times where mics got canceled, people get stabbed, I remember there was a bar we'd go to where the bartender was this badass like Samoan girl, and she just had a gun in her back, just visible to be seen, and it was like, but we loved it. I mean, we'd go there, it was in an awful neighborhood, and we would go there and you never know who'd stumble in, but those shows, Vegas.
Because it's Vegas, would famous people ever pop into mics?
No. Well, first of all, we just didn't have that many mics, and they could just do the strip. One time Hannibal Buress came, which was really funny. I took Hannibal Buress, just so humble. I mean, this is probably 10 years ago, but he still had like a writing credit. He had an Emmy. I remember thinking, I took him to this awful open mic. He's like, I just want to go up, and he went up. Maybe 10 people, and this dude was heckling him, and he just tried to do his stuff and didn't say who he was or anything. I would have been like, hey man, I'm an Emmy, I'm right for 30 Rock. I'm like, to his credit, he was just humble and he ate it like the rest of us. So Hannibal came like I said, the clubs wouldn't really mess with him.
Was he just like
he just
driving
was coming through? No, he was just staying at like the Palms betting basketball games and stuff.
Okay.
He was just living his Vegas life. But that comedy mentality, you're like,
you gotta get that next hit.
Yeah,
next fix.
And there wasn't enough clubs at the time, but so then like the clubs wouldn't work with us. So then what really changed stuff for me is then it was MySpace days, and Doug Stanhope wrote this big like blog thing on MySpace, like comics. If these clubs aren't gonna mess with you, you got to do it yourself. This was the first like DIY shows, and then he was like, you got to do it yourself. So at the time I was working for these professional gamblers, I was making a lot of money, and I had this incredible backyard with a huge balcony that would hold probably 75 people. So I said, what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna do shows in my backyard. So I wrote Stanhope back. I said, hey, I read what you wrote. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do a show in my backyard. Will you come? And he's like, yeah. So then once he said he would come, that kind of gave me some credibility. So then at the time, Tig Notaro was doing like this, where she would just go around and do backyards. Before she was like Tig Notaro, Martha Kelly, Steve Agee, and then a lot of times Zach Galifianakis would show up, and Zach Galifianakis was my favorite comedian. So then I reached out to Tig Notaro, and she said, yeah, we'll come do the show.
That's amazing.
Which is crazy. So my first show was Tig Notaro, Martha Kelly, and Steve Agee in my backyard. And it was awesome. And it was good for me because I was...
Stephen Agee, like Denver?
No, Stephen Agee, like a famous actor that was like on Sarah Silverman's show.
There's Stephen A.J.
Yeah, Stephen A.G.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so they came. So at the time I was making a lot of money, so I built a stage, and I'd rent chairs. Well, the first time I didn't even build a stage. I just had everyone bring chairs, bring their own booze. And Tig was great. It was good for me as like a young douchey comedian who didn't really think girls were funny to see two just incredibly funny girls. It was like the comedy guy was like, hey, you're so wrong about this, because she was incredible at that point. So that show went good. So then I was like, I'd do another show. So then I had so I started reaching out to people, and then I had Neil Hamburger, who came and just did a weird show, but he was awesome. And then I had Brody Stevens and Morgan Murphy, they were great, because I loved both of them, so they were great. And then eventually I had Doug Benson, and then finally Stanhope came. I sold out Stanhope, 300 people in my backyard, $20 a ticket, sold every ticket to the point I had to turn people away. The coolest part of it, the day of, I had Ari Shaffir and Joe Rogan reach out. They were doing House of Blues, saying, hey, I know it's sold out, can we come over? And then Russell Peters was like, hey, can we come over? Because everyone just rubs Stanhope. Neither of them showed up, but in the day I was like, whoa. And then so Stanhope comes out.
How are they hitting you up? Is it like MySpace messaging or something?
I don't even remember how the messages came to me, but I think it was somebody else.
Okay.
Because a lot of comics came, and then someone told me, hey, Russell Peters wants to come. I said, yeah, of course. And then I think another comic said that Ari and Joe were talking about they wanted to come, and I was like, of course. So then Stanhope comes, and then he walks out and just does like this weird Hail Hitler thing. I can't remember what it was. Super funny, but obviously weird for my neighbor. He starts yelling at the neighbors. So I live in a cul-de-sac, and I went around. I gave $50 gift cards to like my closest neighbors. I was like, hey, we're doing a show, because I think it was like on a Thursday night. But not knowing how many people would come, and then I got evicted like a month later. But it was still the coolest thing ever.
Back in the Vegas days, you ran into the Killers? Was
that
like open mics, or?
No, well, they were doing all the same shows. So I became friends with Brandt Tobler.
They were like comedy and music?
So we were just doing the same venue. So like, they would do like Imagine Dragons, Killers, I think
so you just
Panic
go
at the Disco,
on
yeah.
Comedy off night and watch
No. So I didn't make friends. So Brandon Flowers went to my gym, lead singer of the Killers. So then eventually he did a big show. They kind of popped. They got big. They were probably doing like music when I was just doing open mics, but so they were doing like the venues we would end up doing after they kind of blew up. Okay. But he would just go to my gym, and then one day I saw him and I said, hey, he actually, we were like, me and my best friend Justin were like, hey man, great show last night. And he was so sweet. He's like, thanks man. And we talked to him for like 10 minutes. At the end, he's like, hey, if you ever want tickets, let me know. And I go, why, you know someone who could like hook it up? As a joke. And he just looked at me like, you, and I go, Brandon, I'm just joking. And then that's what kind of like broke the ice. So then, you know, Killers are my favorite band. So I was fortunate enough to get to go to a lot of Killer shows thanks to Brandon. So it was awesome.
That's awesome.
But yeah, they were doing the same thing we were. We were all just trying to get out of Vegas. And they obviously, you know, them and Imagine Dragons, Panic, all those guys did great. So.
All right, we got to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back to Denver. So now you're in Denver and you tour all the time.
Yeah.
I'm
here in
shows
Denver.
In Vegas and Arizona.
I've cut back my road gigs because I love it so much here, but I love Denver. I don't miss LA at all.
What's your favorite thing about the Denver scene relative to the other scenes?
Just the Comedy Works downtown club. I think is the best club in the country, besides the Comedy Store and the Comedy Cellar. And that's more just because they get the biggest people in the world. But no, just the Comedy Works, the club itself is my favorite, and the staff are like family now, and the scene here, there's just so many good comics here, so it's I just love it here because, and I grew up 100 miles north, so all my friends and family around, so it's cool to go to these great shows and also have the most important people in my life around. So
that's awesome. All right, we gotta go.
Yeah, gotta go tell jokes.
Who's headlining tonight?
I think it's Kelsey Cook.
Kelsey Cook. All right, bye guys.
See you guys.
I'm with you. Yeah. All right, we're back, everybody. That was an awesome conversation with Brandt last October. It's April 2020 now. We're all on lockdown in Denver, Colorado. I got 5 questions for the comedy man, and let's do it. First one is, so you're not doing live comedy now. What was your last live performance?
My last live performance was actually, it could be my claim to fame, but I really hope it's not. But I'm the last person to headline Comedy Works in Denver here. I was supposed to host for Bobby Lee for the weekend, but then on Friday, he ended up flying home. So Wendy reached out and said, hey, can you headline the weekend, which was awesome for me. Because, you know, I've got to headline off nights at Comedy Works, but to have a full weekend was really, really cool under bad circumstances. And so I got to do 4 shows, which was great. And the crowds I think everybody knew it was coming, and everybody kind of had a feeling it might be their last show. So the crowds, I mean, they weren't huge. We probably had about 150 a show, but they were really, they were great crowds. They bought books and were really nice afterwards. So it was a good ending. Hopefully, obviously, I don't think it'll be the last Comedy Works show ever, but someone pointed that out the other day, like, you're the last headliner at Comedy Works. I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's true.
Awesome. And everybody had fun. Were you guys like separated or spaced out? Like how did that work?
So it was very awkward. So they had people like every other row, and then so they set people 2 or 3 seats apart, which was definitely weird.
Did that change the like dynamic of laughter and stuff?
Yeah, and it's just like I was looking like wondering where people were at, or because Comedy Works is usually sold out. So if there's a couple seats up front, that means someone's late or they're in the bathroom. So it was just weird to look out and have every couple rows 2 or 3 seats open. It just wasn't, you know, just not what we're accustomed to at Comedy Works, where pretty much every show is packed. So
right.
it was a weird dynamic. But
what did they do about, like, were some of those shows sold out, and did people have to get turned away, or how did they handle that?
Yeah, so Bobby, I think, pre-sold them. So then they offered them, you could come see me for free and then get a refund. So a lot of people came still, which was cool, but then I think a lot of people just didn't want. I think that was right at the, you know, as people were starting to realize you probably shouldn't go out, and people were scared about getting sick. So they, for me being last minute and not a huge draw like Bobby Lee, I think, you know, the crowds were decent size. I'm sure the club would have much rather had Bobby Lee, but they're stuck with me.
That's awesome. You got to do that, and you made some money going into this lockdown.
Yeah, it was. You know, it could have come at a perfect time because I made 10 times what I was going to make for the weekend. So, not knowing at the time, I thought it was just going to be a week or 2 thing, but in hindsight, it really helped me because I made a lot more money than I would have. So that was a blessing in disguise for sure. And
after the last show, did people know that was the last show, or was it unknown?
You don't know. I was supposed to do a show like the next night, and we just didn't know. We kind of all went out. That's the last time I drank. We all went out as the staff, and there was rumors and mumblings about it maybe being the last show. And then we went across the street to the bar, and the bartenders over there kind of had more information. And then at the end of the night, I think we kind of knew because we all said goodbye. But even at the time, we didn't know what we were getting into. Like I said, I think we thought it was going to be a week or maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So it was like, hey, I'll see you in a little bit. Where now it's like, to be honest, I don't know if I'll ever see some of those people again. Not to be dramatic, but I don't know if they'll come back to working or, I mean, because I think Comedy Works is going to have a longer layoff than like bars and restaurants.
Yeah,
I think we'll be the last ones to go back. So, unfortunately, you know, I don't know when we go back to work if the staff that I love so much will still be there.
Yeah, boy, that's somber.
Yeah, it sucks.
That does suck. Okay, so you got a lot of downtime. You're not going out performing every night, hanging out with comics. What have you been up to?
You know, I've just been recording a podcast. I've been putting out a podcast every single day.
It's incredible. I see the notifications on my phone. It's like I can barely keep up, which is great because I'll have stuff to listen to into the future, but it's amazing what you're churning out.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for me to still be creative, and I built this podcast studio, and that's another thing I didn't know at the time, which I've been kind of telling people, is I just bet on myself. I couldn't afford to build this studio. I broke it up into 6-month payments, but I just like I just knew I felt like podcasts are the way to go as far as in the comedy world. I know everyone has one, and that's people's argument, but I'm also like, everyone that sells tickets has one. You need to have a podcast. If you're a comic and you don't have a podcast or doing something, you know, you doing something more than stand-up, you're not going to make it in this game. So I built this podcast studio never knowing this would come, and I wrote my book, and my book's what's, saved me during this, because I've sold a ton of books and been able to record podcasts. So it was kind of just reassurance and like, I did the right thing. It's just betting on myself, because this, instead of, no one could know this was going to happen, but thank God I wrote this book, and thank God I built this studio, because it really hasn't slowed me down. I mean, obviously I miss doing stand-up live, but
Right.
it's helped me survive in these, unprecedented times that no one could have known was coming.
Yeah. What's the podcast is called The 31, and you got some other.
Yeah. So the podcast is called The 31, where I've been interviewing I interview a lot of comics or, athletes, rock stars, anybody I find interesting. And it's been a benefit for me on that too, because I'm one of the few people that has a phone. I can just record everything over the phone, and some of the bigger guests, they can't tell me they're too busy now, because I have a lot of famous friends, but they, when I reach out to them about doing a podcast, they always tell me they're too busy. So during this time, no one can really tell me they're too busy. So I've had no trouble getting guests. And like last week I had Brad Garrett, which is somebody I've always wanted. And
Awesome.
He told amazing stories about following Robin Williams and Jay Leno and Letterman at the Comedy Store in the early days. So that was really cool. So yeah, I do that podcast. I do one with my girlfriend called Dead to Us. And then I do another one called Craigslist Chaos, which is, again, I've been fortunate because I don't need guests for Craigslist Chaos. I can just, the premise of Craigslist Chaos is I just get on Craigslist, and anybody that's dumb enough to put their phone number on, I call and I mess with them. So that's been good too, because if I'm upstairs at my house and I'm feeling depressed or feeling like I'm not getting stuff done, I can always come down and record a Craigslist Chaos, because there'll always be idiots on the internet. So that's been good for me too. So I've just been doing that, trying to stay kind of productive. But stuff like this, I've been looking forward to talking to you since you reached out a couple days ago, because I just miss human interaction.
Yeah.
And it's just me and my girlfriend, who's great, but she's like tired of me roasting her, and I miss comics. She's like, you can't really bust balls with your girlfriend every day. My girlfriend even is like, do you want to make your own dinner? I was like, okay, I'm done. So I've just been trying to get through this like everybody else. It sucks, but I just can't wait for it to end.
Right. And your book, what's the best way for people to pick up the book right now while you're on quarantine?
Yeah, the book's available anywhere, Amazon, anywhere that sells books, and on Audible. And I'm very proud of the Audible version, because I recorded it myself. So it's me reading the book over. It's about 6 hours long, and people have said it's cool to hear me do it. And then you can just reach out to me. It's better if you reach out to me at just BrandtTobler.com or on any social media. And then what I've been doing is I send a book, and then I have all these stickers that I send five stickers, a personal note, and then I write a joke for the person, whoever buys it.
That's awesome.
That's better. I make more money that way, and that gives me something to do. So like, when we finish this, I'll go up and autograph a bunch more books, and then load them up with stickers and thank you notes, and take them to the post office. And like I said, I've been able to make money and survive through this, luckily, because I wrote a book.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so new question. You grew up in Wyoming. I read the book. It's a great book. I loved it. In fact, I just finished Sebastian Maniscalco's book, and I think I enjoyed yours more.
Well, I appreciate it.
I mean,
I won't tell him.
Yeah. So you grew up in Wyoming. You lived in Las Vegas. You lived in LA. Now you're in Denver. You're stuck in Denver now. Is it a good place to be? How's the quarantine, stuff like that going?
Yeah, I think I'm in the right spot, honestly. I hated LA when it was fine, so I definitely wouldn't want to be there during the quarantine. But the only other place I would maybe rather be would be in Wyoming, which is home where most of my friends are and some of my family. But it's actually good that I'm here in Denver, because I haven't been drinking I'm using this as a hiatus from drinking because I was drinking way too much. And, you know, I'm more of a social drinker. We don't really drink at home, my girlfriend and I. We only drink when we're out. So there's no real pressure to drink at home, but I'm really bad with peer pressure. So part of me wants to be in Wyoming, but if I was in Wyoming, I would probably, I'm 23 days sober, but if I was in Wyoming, I'd probably be 23 days drunk. So it's been good for my body here. And like I said, I have the content factory here, so I've been able to create. And then my girlfriend's an incredible cook, so and we figured out I had a gluten allergy about a year ago, so she makes every meal gluten free for me. So I have a little long haired dachshund, and my girlfriend spoils me and Teddy. We're living pretty good through this quarantine. And I really can't. I know there's people that have a much worse than me because honestly, I'm doing pretty good during this. But
yeah. Okay, so gambling time. Over under. What date are things going to go back to normal? And actually, I think based on something you said a little bit, let's do this in 2 phases. Like, when will restaurants be open? People be able to go back to work? And then if you think that Comedy Works will open later, what's the date on that?
Yeah. So my guess, I have no guess. I know nothing about any of this. But the original date they gave us was May 11th. So just trying to stay positive, I'm hoping that that's the day until they tell us a worst case scenario. But I'm hoping May 11th, and then I think the restaurants and stuff will probably open a little sooner, but I don't know. But that's what Comedy Works has a show scheduled May 11th, so I'm hoping that's the one.
Yeah. What show is it?
Excuse me, it's Thick Skin, so it'll be awesome.
Yeah. Is that a Monday?
It's a Monday night. If we do a Thick Skin, it'll be cool because I think every comedian in the world will be there, and
that'll be awesome.
I think it'll be a very fun night. So that's what I'm just hopeful for. But I try not to pay attention to anything else because I don't think anybody really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So I just go day to day, and whatever. We can't control it, but that's stuck in my brain until someone tells me different. I'm hoping for May 11th.
Yeah, awesome. Terrific. All right, last question. When we get out of this thing, what are you looking forward to going to eat, going to drink?
Ooh, well, I'm looking forward to drinking just anything. I drink White Claws now a lot. Well, that's all I drink now because it's gluten-free, so I'm going to try to make it the whole time without drinking. So I look forward to a cold White Claw with my friends, and we'll go, I assume the first night out, well, hopefully the first night out we can go to Comedy Works, but there's a restaurant right by Comedy Works called Red Square, this Russian place that has incredible lamb lollipops.
Yeah.
And these Brussels sprouts we love. Or we'll go to the Four Seasons that also has these Brussels sprouts I love and just great. I mean, it's Four Seasons. It has everything. And those are both a block from Comedy Works. So ideally, we'll get out of this, and Shire and I have talked about it. We'll go get a big dinner, and then we'll go see all the comics and see our friends do a show, and then I assume I'll get so drunk that night, just kind of because I've lost my tolerance, but I also just think the camaraderie of seeing everybody, it's like, if someone buys me a shot that night, even if it's not gluten-free, I think it'll be a celebration. It's going to be like New Year's is what I have.
Yeah. It's like Sober October on steroids. It's not only have we not been avoiding alcohol, we've been avoiding a lot of fun things, and for a lot longer than a month. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be canceling. Once they give us the night back, I'll cancel everything that next day and get some Pedialyte. And I just plan on, I assume it's going to be a very drunk, fun night.
Pro comic tip from Brandt Tobler, Pedialyte the next day.
Yeah, because it's going to be a long, long night, and I can't wait for that day to come.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing all your knowledge and experience and always being helpful to newer, younger comics, trying to figure out this thing. And go check out Brandt's book, Free Roll. Best way to get it is to email him or hit him up on social media. He'll send you a signed copy. Check out his podcast, The 31. All the stuff underneath the Content Factory brand, like Craigslist Chaos and all the other stuff he's doing. And BrandtTobler.com for his show dates once we get back up and running.
Yeah. That's it. Oh, you can check me out on YouTube. I got a YouTube page. It's got some it's got stand-up and sketches. And
Yeah, it's got some old funny sketches. I loved seeing some of that stuff.
So there's a bunch of stuff on there if you just want to get away from the awful TV. Or I mean, there's some good TV, but I feel like I've watched it all. So
what do you think about the comedy over video?
It's awful. I won't do it. I won't. I think you need an audience to perform, and it sucks because they did that big fundraiser with some of the biggest comics in the world, who are my heroes, and to watch my heroes just eat it like that. Like, I've tuned in. I think all of us comics are curious, and I know some of them are doing it to make money, but I know they're just doing it off of tips, and I can't imagine making more than $20 or $30. I just think it's bad. I won't put my fans through it, because I know my friends and fans, it's weird to say fans, but like my friends or people that support me will watch whatever I do, but I don't want them to have to pretend like that's good, because I just think you need an audience. Like, I haven't seen it work yet. And a comedy club reached out to me yesterday about doing it. I said I won't do it. They said, well, maybe we'll do something where you roast comics in the other city or roast their city. I go, yeah, I'm okay with that, but the stand up, you just need a crowd, and that's what's been hard. People are like, are you working on a lot of stuff? Like, I'm kind of right now working on jokes, but you don't really know if a joke's good until you perform in front of a live audience. So part of me, I don't want to just do my new stuff in front of no audience, because I don't, or like fake laughter, the ones I've watched, it's like, okay, your comics are awful audience members anyway.
Right.
So if you're in like a Zoom call and then you have to hear like 5 comics like fake laughing, I watched it. It just gave me made the worst feeling. Like, oh, I hate all of this. So hopefully that's another reason to get out of this, because I just don't think it's not good for comedy. There's, everyone knows that you want a low ceiling, dark room, all of that. It's not built to just say into the world.
Were you doing comedy after 9/11? Were you doing comedy way back then?
No, I don't. I think that was. No, I don't think I was doing it then.
Okay.
I think I was a fan. I think I was still chickening out, because I chickened out for a long time. So I don't remember. I think I was still just like a student trying to get the courage to do it. But I didn't know the rules of like, I don't know anything. I mean, I've listened to people talk about it, but and I think 9/11 was just different. Like, I think it's like this. During this, we need laughter, but that was like so bad. Like, I think the 9/11 jokes, they still are a problem, which is weird 20 years later, but I think this is just a whole, I don't think anybody was luckily trying to do stand up for no audience. No matter what.
Yeah, sure.
No matter what the tragedy is, I just don't think, it's like, when I tell people tell me they practice in front of their mirror, I'm like, I never could do that. I mean, I guess, as long as you're practicing, it's good, but you'll never know if something's good or not until you get it in front of audience, as we both know, because there's plenty of times, I'm sure, just like me, where I was like, oh, this is going to crush.
Yeah.
And this is awful. But then I'll say something off the cuff on stage, and it'll crush, and I'll be like, oh, that was the joke.
Yeah.
What I wrote is not even the joke, but I don't know that until I'm in front of a crowd. So to just talk to a screen, like, I don't know, it's just not. I don't think it's good, but more power to whoever's doing it. Maybe somebody will figure out a way to do it, but what I've seen so far has been just brutal.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for your time again. Good to chat with you. Can't wait to hoist a beer with you, or a White Claw, or whatever.
See you again, hopefully sooner than later. And thanks for having me, man. I love what you're doing. This is awesome, and I hope, like I just said, I chickened out for years because I just didn't know what to do, and it was a different time. But I think this is what you're doing is a great thing for, if you're thinking about doing comedy. I'm sure through these videos, after you watch them, it's so hopefully it helps.
Well, on your podcast as well, I know I've told you this, but I ripped through all your episodes, which took like a month, to listen to them all, and I got so much out of listening to all those old conversations with the comedians. So
it's like free. It's like free college. If you want to do it, you can study the game and then just get up there. So if this helps one person, and like what you're doing, I'm sure you're the same as me. If we can help, it's like a fraternity. Reach out to us. Well, especially now, I don't have anything to do. If you have questions about comedy, shoot me a message, and I can talk comedy I love it. I can
Yeah.
talk forever. So
Awesome, man.
I always enjoy doing this stuff with you. So thank you for having me.
Cool, dude. Thanks, Brandt. We'll
right.
we'll
I'll
see you
see you soon,
around.
hopefully.
Be safe. Be healthy. Bye.